My name is Julia Vance. I'm 36, and for the past 3 years, I've served as a circuit judge in my home county. This morning, I'm steeling myself for a particular hearing, one that will put me in the same room as my estranged sister Chloe for the first time in what feels like a lifetime. The catch? She has no clue I'll be the one sitting on the bench presiding over her fate. Our bond shattered a long time ago, but even so, I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen when she finally saw me. But before I get into that shocking confrontation, do me a favor and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from, and make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss out on more true stories just like this one. Growing up, Chloe was 6 years younger than me. That age gap meant I was often more of a third parent than a big sister. Our mom, Sharon, was a lab technician at Memorial Hospital, working long night shifts, while our dad, David, taught history at the local high school. Those early days were the good ones, the kind filled with the simple, ordinary happiness of childhood. I was the one who brushed Chloe's hair before school, helped her with her reading, and stood up to any kid on the playground who dared to mess with her. She looked up to me with that wide-eyed adoration that only a little sister can muster. But all of that changed when I was 16 and Chloe was 10. Our father was driving home late from a school function on a cold winter night. A patch of black ice sent his car spinning into an oncoming lane. He was killed on impact. I can still picture Mom gathering us in the living room, her eyes completely empty, telling us that Dad wasn't coming home, not ever again. That night, I held Chloe in my arms as she cried herself to sleep, and I made a silent vow that I would always, always protect her. With Dad gone, Mom had to pick up even more shifts to keep our heads above water financially. The weight of looking after Chloe landed squarely on my shoulders. I cooked her dinners, I made sure her homework was done, and I tried my best to fill the enormous hole our father had left behind. In those first few months, Chloe clung to me like I was her only lifeline. But as the months turned into a year, something began to shift. The pre-teen years are a minefield on their own, let alone when you're grieving a parent. Chloe started to push back against my authority. "You're not my mother," she'd snap whenever I'd ask where she was going or tell her she needed to be home by dark. "Stop trying to be the one in charge of me." Every time she lashed out, I tried to tell myself it was just the grief talking, that all her anger was just pain wearing a different mask. But it didn't matter. Her words felt like tiny paper cuts over and over again. While Chloe was pushing me away, I was burying myself in my schoolwork. My education became my sanctuary and my one-way ticket to a different future. By the time I was a senior, I was at the top of my class, the captain of the debate team, and laser-focused on earning a scholarship to a good law school. My high school guidance counselor, a kind man named Mr. Henderson, saw a spark in me that I didn't even see in myself. "Julia, you have the makings of an incredible lawyer," he told me during one of our college application sessions. "That analytical mind, that powerful sense of justice, your ability to speak so clearly. These are real gifts." When I got the acceptance letter with a full-ride scholarship to a prestigious university a few states away, it was the first piece of good news our family had gotten in years. Mom was so proud, even through her bone-deep exhaustion from the endless shifts. Chloe, on the other hand, saw it as the ultimate betrayal. "So you're just going to leave us?" She accused me the night I told them. "Mom's always at work. And now you're running away too." "I'm not running away," I tried to explain, my voice gentle. "This is a chance for me to build a better life, for all of us." "Whatever helps you sleep at night," she shot back before slamming her bedroom door shut. The summer before I left for college, Mom met Mark Peterson. He was a medical device salesman who was a frequent visitor to the hospital. Their relationship was a whirlwind, and by Christmas of my freshman year, they were engaged. Mark could be incredibly charming when he wanted to be, but from the moment I met him, I felt something was off. He seemed a little too interested in the life insurance policy our father had left behind, money that Mom had been meticulously saving for our college funds. Mark and I never clicked, but he formed a strange and immediate bond with Chloe. While he was often dismissive or even hostile toward me, he showered Chloe with gifts and praise. He became the fun parent, undermining Mom's rules and painting me as the uptight, controlling sister whenever I voiced any concern. "Your sister is just jealous," I once heard him telling Chloe. "Some people just can't handle it when other people are happy." By the time I came home for the summer after my sophomore year, the entire dynamic of our family had been rewritten. Mom seemed to have shrunk, deferring to Mark on decisions she would have once made on her own. And Chloe, now a volatile 14, treated me like an intruder in the house I grew up in. "Mark says you think you're too good for us now that you go to that fancy school," Chloe announced one evening while I was doing the dishes. "That's not true at all," I said, the accusation hurting more than I wanted to admit. "I miss you guys every single day." Chloe just rolled her eyes, a gesture that was quickly becoming her signature response to me. "Yeah, right. They got married that August in a small backyard ceremony. I stood up there next to Mom, forcing a smile for the pictures, while Mark kept whispering things into Chloe's ear that made her glare at me for the entire reception. Something between us was breaking, something essential, and I felt completely helpless to stop it. When I went back to school for my junior year, the phone calls home dwindled. Chloe would rarely even come to the phone, and on the rare occasions she did, her answers were short and cold. Every time I visited, the gulf between us widened, carefully cultivated by Mark's little digs and Chloe's own teenage resentment. By the time I graduated and was accepted into law school, we were basically strangers who just happened to share a childhood that neither of us seemed to remember in the same way. Law school was a beast, even more demanding than I'd imagined. I worked through holidays, took on extra classes in the summer, and ran on fumes during finals. When other students went home for breaks, I stayed on campus, working as a research assistant for Professor Annabelle Shaw, a brilliant constitutional law expert who took me under her wing and became my mentor. The few times I did go home, Chloe was always out with her friends or locked in her room, making it crystal clear she had no desire to reconnect. It was during my second year of law school that I met Ben Carter, another law student with a sharp wit and a future as bright as mine. We started dating, spending our nights in the library quizzing each other on case law and talking about all the ways we were going to change the world. For the first time since my dad passed away, I felt like I was building something real, a life that I could truly be proud of. Meanwhile, Chloe was spiraling out of control. She started ditching school, her grades tanked, and Mom called me in tears more than once after finding liquor bottles hidden in her room. At 17, she dropped out of high school completely. I pleaded with Mom to intervene, but Mark had convinced her that trying to stop Chloe would only drive her further away. I was in my last year of law school, neck deep in bar exam prep, when I got the call. Chloe and her boyfriend Kyle had eloped in Vegas. "She's too young," I told Mom over the phone, pacing my tiny apartment. "She doesn't even know who she is yet." "Your sister knows exactly what she wants," Mom said, her voice heavy with fatigue. "Mark thinks we should just support her." Of course Mark thought that. The further Chloe drifted from us, the more influence he had over Mom and her finances. I held my tongue, knowing any criticism of Mark would just push Mom further away from me, too. After I passed the bar, I took a job as an assistant prosecutor in the very same county where I grew up. The pay was a fraction of what corporate firms were offering, but I felt a pull toward criminal law, toward the idea of fighting for justice for victims and holding people accountable. Ben and I went our separate ways shortly after graduation. He took a high-paying job with a firm 3 states away, and we both knew our careers would always come first. A long-distance relationship just wasn't practical. My first apartment was a tiny 1-bedroom near the courthouse, filled with mismatched furniture from thrift stores. On my first day as a prosecutor, I called Mom to share my excitement, secretly hoping she might hand the phone to Chloe so I could tell her, too. Instead, Mom told me that Chloe and Kyle had moved to a different town, about an hour away. "She's not really talking to any of us right now," Mom explained. "Kyle thinks we're too judgmental of their lifestyle." I still tried. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents. I'd send texts just checking in. Most of my messages went unanswered. The few replies I got were short and dismissive. About 2 years into my job, I ran into Chloe at a gas station. I barely recognized her. She was thin, with dark circles under her eyes, and she had this nervous energy, constantly looking over her shoulder. When I called her name, she actually flinched before forcing a tight smile. "Julia, wow. Still saving the world one bad guy at a time?" Her voice was laced with bitterness, but I couldn't help but notice a dark bruise peeking out from the collar of her shirt. "Chloe, are you okay?" I asked, my voice low, subtly nodding toward the bruise. Her hand immediately shot up to her neck, her eyes darting around. "I'm fine. Kyle and I just had a little argument, that's all. Not that it's any of your business. If he's hurting you, there are people who can help," I said, reaching into my purse for a card from the domestic violence shelter I worked with. "God, you are unbelievable," she hissed, backing away. "Always looking for a problem, always thinking you know what's best for everyone. Kyle loves me. We're happy. Just because your relationship didn't work out doesn't mean you get to ruin mine. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I'm worried about you. Save it for your courtroom speeches," she snapped, abandoning her things on the counter and storming out. "Stay out of my life, Julia." I called Mom that night, telling her what I'd seen. She just sighed. Mark talked to Kyle. He said Chloe fell carrying in groceries. You know how clumsy she can be. "Mom, that's what they always say. And the victims cover for them. This is literally what I do for a living. Julia, please. Mark says we need to respect their marriage. Not everything is a case for you to prosecute." A week later, Chloe called me herself, her voice shaking with pure fury. "How dare you try to convince Mom that Kyle is abusing me? Mark told us everything. You've always been jealous that I found someone, and you're all alone with your precious career. Stay out of my marriage, or I swear to God you will never see me or Mom again." She hung up before I could even get a word in. The next major family event was my cousin's wedding. I was honestly surprised I even got an invitation. When I got to the reception, I saw Chloe and Kyle across the room. Chloe actually looked healthier, and she was laughing at something Kyle whispered in her ear. But the second she saw me, her smile evaporated. She spent the rest of the night actively avoiding me, leaving any part of the room I entered. 6 months after that, Mom called to tell me Chloe was pregnant. I sent a handmade baby blanket and a card, hoping this new baby might be a bridge. The package came back a week later, unopened, with "return to sender" scrawled across it in Chloe's handwriting. When my niece, Lily, was born, I found out through a Facebook post from a distant relative. I was never invited to see her. I wasn't in any of the family photos that were passed around. My niece was growing up not even knowing I existed. Every missed milestone was just another brick in the wall between us. I was 36 and had been a prosecutor for almost a decade when I got the call about being nominated for a judgeship. My reputation for being fair and meticulous had caught the eye of the Judicial Nominating Committee. After a long and stressful vetting process, I was chosen to fill a vacancy on the circuit court bench. It was an honor that few attorneys ever achieve, especially at my age. The investiture ceremony was held in the main courtroom, the same one where I'd tried my very first case. My colleagues from the prosecutor's office filled the rows, alongside defense attorneys I'd gone up against for years, all of them putting aside their adversarial roles for a day. Professor Shaw even drove 3 hours to be there, beaming with pride as I took my oath. The empty seats in the front row were glaring. I had sent invitations to Mom, Mark, and Chloe. I didn't expect them to come, but I couldn't bring myself to exclude them. As I scanned the crowd during my acceptance speech, I tried not to look at those empty seats. I pledged to uphold the law with integrity, to treat every person who came before me with dignity, and to always remember that justice must be tempered with compassion. At the reception, colleagues introduced me to their spouses and children, which only highlighted how solitary my own journey had been. That night, when I returned to my empty house, I felt an overwhelming mix of pride and a profound, crushing loneliness. About 2 weeks after my appointment, Mom called and asked if we could get coffee. We hadn't seen each other in person for months. We met at a little cafe halfway between our houses. Mom looked older than her years, the stress of everything etched into the lines around her eyes. "Congratulations on becoming a judge," she said after we ordered. Mark saw it in the paper. "Thanks," I replied, noting she didn't say she was proud, just that it happened. "How are you? How's Chloe?" Mom's expression immediately darkened. That's part of why I wanted to talk. Chloe and Kyle are having problems, financial mostly, but other things too. She told me that Kyle had left Chloe 6 months ago for another woman. He had cleaned out their joint bank account and moved to another state, leaving Chloe and 5-year-old Lily with nothing. Chloe had moved back in with Mom and Mark, but the situation was explosive. "Mark thinks she needs to stand on her own 2 feet, Mom explained, twisting her ring. "He says we can't support her forever, but she doesn't have a diploma and daycare costs more than she could ever make." "I can help," I said instantly. "I can send money for Lily, or help Chloe get her GED. I could even pay for a lawyer to go after Kyle for child support." Mom just shook her head. "I mentioned you might be able to help, and, well, Chloe didn't take it well. She said she would rather be homeless than take a handout from you." The rejection stung, but it wasn't a surprise. "And Mark?" I asked, my voice tight. "What does he have to say? He keeps saying things about how you must have pulled strings to get appointed so young, how people like you step on others to get ahead. The familiar mix of hurt and anger washed over me. And you let him say that? You know it's not true. I'm caught in the middle, Julia. I love both my daughters. I love my husband. I can't always be the referee." We left with a stiff, awkward hug. Driving home, I wondered if our family was just broken beyond repair. In the following months, I poured myself into my new role as a judge. The learning curve was steep, and the weight of the responsibility was immense, but I found a deep sense of purpose in it. I earned a reputation for being thorough, for reading every single document, for giving every case my full attention. Outside of work, my life was quiet. I volunteered at the local library on weekends, helping kids discover the same love for books that had been my own escape as a child. Every now and then, I'd hear things. A court clerk who went to the same church as my mother mentioned hearing Mark tell someone I'd used political connections to get my seat. A paralegal told me she'd run into Chloe at the grocery store, and my sister had made some nasty comment about people who think they're better than everyone else just because they wear a robe to work. It hurt every time. But I learned to compartmentalize the pain, to push it aside and focus on the work. One Tuesday morning, my judicial assistant, Susan, put a new file on my desk. Family court matter, Judge Vance, custody dispute, emergency hearing set for Friday. I just nodded, adding it to the stack I'd review that night. It wasn't until I was home, settled in my office with a cup of tea, that I opened the file and saw the names on the petition. Reed, Chloe versus Reed, Laura. Custody of minor child, Lily Reed. My heart stopped cold. Chloe was in a custody battle with her ex-mother-in-law over Lily, and the case had been assigned to me. The ethical alarm bells in my head were deafening. As a judge, I was supposed to recuse myself from any case with a personal conflict. The next morning, I was in the chambers of Judge Evelyn Hayes, a seasoned jurist who had become a mentor to me. "Evelyn," I said, placing the file on her desk, "I've been assigned a case involving my estranged sister." Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow and opened the file. "Chloe Reed is your sister?" "Yes. We haven't spoken in years. In fact, she actively dislikes me." "That certainly complicates things," she said, scanning the pages. "Normally, recusal would be a no-brainer. But with Judge Brewer on medical leave and Judge Patel at that conference in D.C., we're stretched thin." "I know. That's why I came to you. The hearing is Friday. The parties have already been notified. Postponing it would mean a delay of at least 2 weeks." Judge Hayes leaned back, studying me. "What does your gut tell you, Julia? Can you be impartial?" I thought about it carefully. I believe I can judge the facts without bias. My real concern is the appearance of impropriety and how Chloe will react when she sees me. "Has she asked for you to be recused?" "She doesn't know I'm the judge yet. Given our history, I'm sure she would." "I see," Judge Hayes said, tapping a pen on her desk. "Here's my advice. Review the file. If you find any reason you can't be objective, we'll figure out a reassignment, no matter how difficult. If you believe you can rule based solely on the law and the facts, then you proceed with the hearing." "And if Chloe objects?" I asked. "You treat her objection like any other motion to recuse," she said firmly. "Rule on its legal merit, not its emotional content. This isn't about your sisterhood. It's about whether justice can be served." Back in my chambers, I dove into the case file, and the more I read, the more worried I became for Lily. According to the petition filed by Laura Reed, Kyle's mother, Chloe had been evicted from 3 different apartments in the last year for not paying rent. Lily had missed a significant number of days of kindergarten, and a teacher had reported that the child often arrived at school hungry, wearing unwashed clothes. But the most alarming part was a police report. It documented an incident where Lily, only 5 years old, was found wandering alone by a pond at a local park, nearly half a mile from their apartment, while Chloe was allegedly asleep at home. Laura Reed was asking for temporary custody, arguing that Chloe's instability and neglect were putting Lily in danger. Her petition included statements from Lily's teacher, a pediatrician who had treated Lily for malnutrition, and neighbors who had seen Lily unsupervised. Chloe's response, filed by a public defender, denied everything, claiming Laura was just a vindictive woman trying to replace her absent son with her granddaughter. The response had a few character statements from friends, but no hard evidence to refute the documented incidents. I barely slept that night, torn between my judicial duty and the tangled mess of my feelings as a sister. If these allegations were true, my niece was in a dangerous situation. If I recused myself and the hearing was delayed, that danger would continue. But I also knew that the second Chloe saw me on that bench, she would explode, and it could torpedo her entire case. The morning of the hearing, I called my assistant. "Susan, the Reed custody case. The parties haven't been told which judge is presiding, correct?" "That's right, Judge Vance. It's court policy to prevent any attempts at ex parte communication." "Good. Please let security know we might have a volatile situation in the courtroom today. Just a precaution." "Of course, Judge. I'll talk to Bailiff Johnson." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back at me seemed so composed, so professional, the black robe a symbol of authority and impartiality. But underneath it all, I was still the girl who used to braid her little sister's hair, the girl who had promised to always keep her safe. "What would Dad think of us now?" I whispered to my reflection. The only answer was the silent echo of my own doubt. The day of the hearing, I got to the courthouse extra early. The ritual of preparing always calmed me, putting on the robe, reviewing my notes, making sure everything was in its place. Bailiff Johnson checked in, confirming he'd be in the courtroom for the whole thing. "Any specific concerns, Judge?" he asked. "One of the parties may not be happy to see me presiding," I said vaguely. "Just be ready for an emotional reaction." As 9 a.m. approached, I sat in my chambers, taking deep, steadying breaths, trying to ground myself in the principles that had guided my entire career. Whatever happened in that courtroom, I would make sure Lily's best interests came first. That was all that mattered. At precisely 9 a.m., I nodded to Bailiff Johnson. He opened the door and his voice boomed, "All rise." The Honorable Judge Julia Vance presiding. I walked into the courtroom, my face a neutral mask, my heart pounding against my ribs. The moment of truth I had been dreading and preparing for was here. The courtroom was packed. Besides the parties and their lawyers, there were social workers, a guardian ad litem appointed for Lily, and what looked like supporters for both sides. The air was thick with tension before I even sat down. As I took my seat on the bench, I did a professional scan of the room, careful not to let my eyes linger on anyone. Laura Reed sat on the left with her attorney, a respected family law practitioner I knew well. They both rose as I entered. On the right, Chloe was sitting beside her public defender, a young lawyer who looked fresh out of law school. Chloe was looking down, shuffling papers, completely unaware of who had just walked in. She'd changed. Her hair was shorter, the blonde faded with dark roots showing, and she looked thinner than I'd ever seen her. The years had not been kind. "Good morning," I began, my voice even and professional. "This is case number FC 2023-08411, Reed versus Reed, regarding the custody of the minor child, Lily Reed. Counsel, please state your appearances for the record." Laura Reed's attorney stood. "Sarah Barnes for the petitioner. Laura Reed, Your Honor." The public defender rose next. "Nicholas Parker for the respondent, Chloe Reed." As he said her name, Chloe finally looked up. Our eyes met. I watched the emotions flood her face in a split-second progression: shock, confusion, disbelief, and then a blaze of white-hot rage. Her jaw dropped, then snapped shut. Her hands clenched the table, knuckles turning white. "Before we begin," I continued, forcing myself to maintain my judicial composure, "I want to remind everyone that this is a court of law. The welfare of the child is our only concern today." Chloe shot to her feet, shoving her attorney's hand away as he tried to pull her down. "What the hell is this?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. "She can't be the judge. She's my sister." Her lawyer, Nicholas Parker, looked from me to Chloe, his face a mask of confusion and alarm. "Your Honor, I was not aware of any familial relationship." Before I could even respond, Chloe cut me off, her voice climbing higher. Relationship? She hates me. She's here to ruin my life. Miss Reed, I said, my voice firm but quiet, this is a setup. You're a manipulative, worthless piece of... Miss Reed, I repeated, a little louder this time. Bailiff Johnson took a step forward, a silent reminder of the court's authority. Her lawyer was desperately whispering at her, but she was beyond reason. I want her removed, Chloe screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's a fraud. She's just here to take my daughter away because she's a pathetic old maid who never had a family of her own. She's worthless scum, pretending to be someone important. The courtroom fell dead silent. Laura Reed looked horrified. Her attorney was scribbling furiously on a legal pad. Miss Reed, I said, my voice dangerously calm, I understand this is a surprise. However, your behavior is completely inappropriate. I'm giving you one chance to compose yourself. If you cannot, you will be held in contempt of court. Her face was flushed with rage. You can't judge me. It's a conflict of interest. Someone get a real judge in here. Nicholas Parker finally got her attention. Miss Reed, please sit down. Let me handle this. He turned to me. Your Honor, given the apparent close familial relationship, we respectfully request your recusal. I nodded. Counselor, I appreciate your concern. However, while Miss Reed and I are sisters, we have had no meaningful contact for nearly 7 years. I have reviewed the ethical guidelines and consulted with the chief judge. There is no automatic disqualification, especially given the emergency nature of this hearing and our district's limited judicial resources. Parker looked uneasy. Your Honor, with all due respect, the outburst we just witnessed suggests that the complex family dynamics could prejudice the proceedings. I can assure you, Counselor, that I will judge this case solely on its merits and the best interests of the child. Miss Reed's behavior will not prejudice me against her. However, I added, letting my gaze rest on Chloe for a moment, continued disruptions will not be tolerated. Now, shall we proceed? Or do you wish to file a formal motion for recusal, understanding that it would delay this matter by at least 2 weeks? Parker glanced at Chloe, who was still fuming, but had finally reluctantly sat down. We will proceed, Your Honor, but we note our objection for the record. So noted, I replied. Miss Barnes, you may begin. Sarah Barnes stood. Thank you, Your Honor. We are here today because my client, Laura Reed, is gravely concerned about her granddaughter's safety. The testimony was difficult to hear. Lily's kindergarten teacher took the stand first. How often would you say Lily comes to school without having had breakfast? I asked, after the teacher described the child's constant hunger. At least 3 days a week, Your Honor. We keep granola bars in the classroom for her. And have you discussed this with Miss Reed? Yes, several times. She usually says they were running late or that Lily is a picky eater. But Lily always says she's starving when she arrives. Chloe's lawyer did his best on cross-examination, but he was green. He focused on tiny details instead of the overall pattern of neglect the testimony was painting. Next was the pediatrician. Lily was brought to me by her grandmother, she testified. My examination revealed she was suffering from mild malnutrition and several vitamin deficiencies consistent with an inadequate diet. Did you speak with Miss Reed about this? I asked. I tried to, Your Honor. She became very defensive and accused me of calling her a bad mother. She left before we could discuss a nutrition plan. With every piece of testimony, Chloe grew more and more agitated, whispering angrily to her lawyer and shaking her head. The most damaging testimony came from the police officer who had found Lily at the park. The child was approximately 4 blocks from her home, he stated. A citizen called it in when they saw her playing alone near the water. When we located Miss Reed, she was asleep in her apartment. She said she had worked a late shift and was exhausted. Was there any evidence of substance use? I asked, knowing how critical that was. No drugs were observed, Your Honor, but Miss Reed did appear disoriented, and there was an empty bottle of wine visible in the living room. Chloe's lawyer called a friend of hers, who testified that Chloe was a loving mother who was just overwhelmed, but even she admitted she had been concerned. She loves Lily more than anything, the friend insisted. But yeah, sometimes she just checks out. Being a single mom is hard. Throughout it all, I directed questions to both sides with the same meticulous attention to detail, careful to show no bias. When Chloe finally took the stand, I addressed her with the same formal tone I had used for everyone else. Miss Reed, please describe your current living situation and employment. She glared at me, her hostility a physical presence in the room. Like you care. This whole thing is just you trying to prove you were right about me all along. Miss Reed, I said evenly. Please answer the question. I'm staying with a friend. I have an interview next week. I'm doing my best since Kyle abandoned us. The court records show 3 evictions in the past year. Can you explain that? Money got tight. He stopped paying child support. Not all of us have a fancy job and a big house. The personal attacks kept coming, but I refused to take the bait. I just focused on getting the facts. When Laura Reed testified, I was just as rigorous, questioning her about her motivations and her relationship with Chloe. But then, an unexpected voice called out from the gallery. I'd like to speak on behalf of my stepdaughter. Mark Peterson stood up. I was shocked to see him. After being sworn in, he launched into a speech that was less a defense of Chloe and more an attack on me. Chloe has always been the compassionate one in the family, he said, looking right at me. Not like some people who abandon their family to chase a career. Julia has always been jealous of Chloe's natural warmth. Mr. Peterson, I interrupted, my voice sharp. This testimony is not relevant. Please restrict your comments to Miss Reed's parenting. He just smirked. Of course you'd say that. Can't stand hearing the truth about yourself. Mr. Peterson, this is your final warning. One more disrespectful comment and you will be removed. He changed his tune, then, claiming everyone else was exaggerating and that Christine was just a vindictive old woman. When both sides had rested, I called for closing arguments. As Chloe's lawyer finished, she suddenly stood up again. This is all a lie, she cried. She has wanted to destroy me for years. Ever since we were kids, Julia has thought she was better than me. Now she's going to use her power to take my daughter away. It was the explosion I had been dreading. For a second, all the professional distance I'd built threatened to shatter. But I took a deep breath, remembering Judge Hayes's words. Miss Reed, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The court understands these are emotional proceedings. However, outbursts like this do not help your case. They do, however, provide insight into the emotional environment in which your daughter is being raised. Chloe's face just crumpled, the anger finally giving way to tears. You have no idea what it's like, she sobbed. You have your perfect life, your perfect career. You've never struggled. You've never known what it feels like to fail at everything. For a split second, the courtroom disappeared, and I didn't see the angry woman in front of me. I saw the little girl whose tears I used to wipe away. But Lily's safety depended on me being a judge, not a sister. This court will take a 30-minute recess to review all testimony before rendering a decision, I announced, rising from the bench. Court is in recess. In my chambers, I went over my notes. The case was clear. The evidence of neglect was overwhelming. Multiple independent witnesses had testified to Lily's unsafe environment. But I knew that no matter what I decided, it would be seen as biased. If I ruled for Laura, Chloe would see it as a personal attack. If I ruled for Chloe, I would be ignoring the evidence and failing in my duty. Just then, there was a knock. It was Judge Hayes. "I observed part of the hearing," she said, closing the door. "Quite a situation." "That's one word for it," I sighed. "I'm trying to focus on the evidence, but it's hard when the respondent keeps making it personal." "I saw," she nodded. "For what it's worth, I thought you handled it with remarkable restraint." "Eleanor," she said, leaning forward, "in family court, there are no decisions that make everyone happy. Our job is to protect those who can't protect themselves, based on the evidence. You know this. I do. The evidence is clear. I'm just struggling with the personal part." "Then set it aside," she said, rising to leave. "In that courtroom, you are not Julia the sister. You are Judge Vance, and your duty is to Lily Reed." When she left, I read the guardian ad litem's report one last time. The social worker's recommendation was unequivocal. Temporary custody should go to Laura Reed, with supervised visitation for Chloe, pending her completion of parenting classes and securing stable housing. My decision was made. It was the same ruling I would have made in any other case. And in that clarity, I found a strange kind of peace. I wasn't betraying my sister. I was protecting her daughter. When I returned to the courtroom, the tension was even higher. I took my seat and began. After careful review of all evidence, I said, my voice steady, "This court must make its determination based on one paramount consideration, the welfare and best interests of Lily Reed." I laid out the evidence, acknowledging Chloe's love for her daughter, but also the undeniable pattern of neglect. The court finds that the petitioner has presented substantial evidence that the minor child's current situation presents a risk to her health and safety. Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that temporary legal and physical custody of Lily Reed is granted to Laura Reed for a period of 6 months. I outlined the conditions for Chloe to regain custody, completing a parenting course, finding stable housing and a job, and regular counseling. This arrangement will be reassessed in 6 months, I concluded. As I finished, Chloe finally broke. "How could you do this to me?" she cried, tears streaming down her face. "You've taken everything from me. First Mom's attention, then Dad's love, and now my daughter." Patrick stood up too, pointing at me. "This is a disgrace, a judge settling family scores." "Mr. Douglas, you are out of order," I stated. "Bailiff, please escort Mr. Douglas from the courtroom." As the bailiff moved toward Mark, Chloe continued her tirade, years of pain pouring out. "You always thought you were better than me, the perfect daughter, the brilliant student, and now you sit up there judging me. You have no idea what my life has been like in your shadow. You left for college and you forgot I even existed. When Kyle hit me, you tried to control that too, instead of just being there for me. You've never just been my sister, Julia. You've always been my judge." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I had always seen myself as trying to protect her, but from her perspective, my help had always felt like judgment. My success had been an indictment of her failures. "Miss Reed," I said, my voice strained, "your feelings about our personal history are not relevant to this court's decision." "Bullshit," she sobbed. "This is personal, and you know it." "Chloe," I said, dropping the formality for just a second, "this is not the time or place. This ruling is about Lily's needs, not ours." "Of course it is," she said bitterly. "It's always about what you think is best." Her lawyer finally managed to guide her back to her seat. "This court stands adjourned," I announced, and retreated to my chambers, my hands shaking as I took off my robe. A few minutes later, Susan buzzed. "Judge, Miss Reed's attorney has requested a brief meeting. He's alone. Send him in." Nicholas Parker entered, looking mortified. Your Honor, I want to apologize for my client's behavior. No apology necessary, counselor. It was an emotional day. With all due respect, Judge, he said, while I believe your ruling was legally sound, the optics are problematic. I'm concerned about grounds for an appeal. You are welcome to file whatever motions you deem appropriate, I told him. But I assure you, my ruling was based entirely on the best interests of the child. After he left, I sat in the silence, the weight of the day crushing me. I had upheld my oath, but in doing so, I had probably destroyed any last chance of reconciliation with my sister. As I was packing up to leave, there was another knock. I opened it, and there was Chloe. Her eyes were red and swollen, the fight completely gone out of her. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked into my chambers and just looked around at the law books, the framed degrees, the formal portrait of me in my robe. I pointed to a chair, and she sat, twisting a tissue in her hands. "I hate that you saw me like that," she finally said. "I hate that everyone saw me like that." "It was a difficult day," I replied, unsure of where this was going. She looked up, her eyes clear for the first time. "Did you know it would be you? Did you ask for my case?" "No," I said honestly. "It was assigned randomly. I considered recusing myself, but with the judicial shortage, and because it was an emergency, I determined I could be impartial." "Impartial," she repeated, a hint of the old bitterness in her voice. "How can you be impartial with me? You've been judging me my whole life." I took a deep breath. "Chloe, I have never judged you the way you think. I've worried about you, I've missed you, but I have never thought I was better than you. You didn't have to think it. Everyone else did. It was always about how Julia was handling everything, being so strong. I was just falling apart. I was falling apart on the inside too, I admitted. I just didn't let anyone see. I thought I had to be strong for you." "Well, I couldn't be strong," she said. "I was a mess. And then you left. For college, Chloe, not forever. I tried to stay in touch. You're the one who stopped taking my calls. Because it hurt too much," she exclaimed. "Every time we talked, you had some new success, and I was just failing. It was easier to be angry than to feel like a loser every time I compared myself to you. It was a revelation. I had never once considered that her anger was a shield for her pain." "I had no idea," I said softly. "And then Mark came along," I said, the pieces clicking into place. She nodded. "He made me feel special. He always pointed out your flaws, how cold and ambitious you were." "That's not who I am." "I know that now, I think," she admitted. "Seeing you today, you were so calm even when I was being horrible." "And your ruling?" Her voice broke. "It was fair. I know I haven't been the mother Lily deserves." Tears filled her eyes again. "I miss her already." "This is temporary, Chloe," I reminded her. 6 months. You can do this. You can get her back. How? I have no job, no apartment, no money." I hesitated, then made the offer I'd made so many times before. "I can help you. Not as a judge, as your sister. I can help with the classes, help you find a place." She looked at me, suspicious. "Why?" "After everything I said today?" "Because you're my sister," I said simply. "Because I remember reading you bedtime stories, because I've never stopped caring about you." "I don't know if I can accept your help," she whispered. "It feels like admitting defeat." "It's not defeat to accept help from family," I told her. "It's what families are supposed to do." "Even after I called you worthless scum in front of a courtroom?" she asked, a flicker of dark humor in her voice. "Even then," I confirmed. A tiny smile touched her lips. "I want to be a good mom," she said after a long silence. "I love Lily more than anything." When Kyle left, something inside me just broke. I know. The ruling wasn't a judgment on your love. It was about her immediate safety. She nodded slowly. Laura is good to her. She'll be okay. She looked up at me. Would you want to meet her sometime? Lily, I mean. The offer stole my breath. I would love that. Whenever you think it's right. Maybe after one of my visits. Once we explain who you are, her aunt. Not just the judge. I would like that very much. When Chloe left my chambers, nothing was magically fixed, but a door that had been sealed shut for over a decade had just been cracked open. Over the next few months, I stayed away from her case professionally, but personally, we started to rebuild. I helped her find a small apartment and paid for her parenting classes. We started talking, really talking, about the years we'd lost. Mom was overjoyed, and the three of us even had dinner together. At the 6-month review, a different judge granted Chloe expanded visitation. And 2 weeks after that, Chloe brought Lily to my house for lunch. I was a nervous wreck, but when I opened the door, I saw a little girl with Chloe's blonde hair and our father's thoughtful brown eyes. Lily, Chloe said, this is your Aunt Julia. Lily looked at me seriously. Mom says you used to braid her hair. That's true, I smiled. I could braid yours too if you want. She thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but I want a French braid. As I braided Lily's hair, with Chloe watching, I realized our family was finally finding its way back. The path wasn't easy. It took patience and a lot of letting go of old hurts. A year after that hearing, Chloe regained primary custody of Lily. I was there the day Lily moved back in with her. The smile on my sister's face was worth every painful moment. What I learned was that true justice isn't blind. It has to see the full, complicated picture. As a judge, I apply the law, but as a person, I know that behind every case is a human story. My sister called me worthless that day, but what she really meant was that she felt worthless. We both had to learn that our worth isn't measured by job titles or a perfect record. It's found in our resilience, in the courage to face our own failures, and in the grace we choose to give each other. If this story touched you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories about family and forgiveness. Share your own experiences in the comments below. Thank you for listening. And remember that even the deepest wounds can heal with time, truth, and the courage to begin again.